Our next two guests are going to help us unpack Kamala Harris's $5 trillion tax plan, which includes an increase of the highest marginal rate for the top 1% to 39.6%, increasing the tax on capital gains to be same as ordinary income, and, as Becky loves to point out, unrealized gains for taxpayers with wealth greater than $100 million, and, of course, raising that corporate rate to 28%. Joining us now to unpack it all, talk about what it means for high earners and companies, Wendy Edelberg, Senior Fellow with Brookings Economic Studies and Director of the Hamilton Project, and Scott Lincicome, the Cato Institute's Vice President for General Economics. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. So, Scott, I want to start with you. There was the Penn Wharton study got a lot of attention this week, but they did not include Vice President Harris's revenue raisers there. And I wonder, when you factor that in, what impact could her plan have on the deficit?
Right. Well, when you include some of the things that she's proposed recently, whether that's not taxing tipped income, expanding the child tax credit, and then some of the other things we've heard from Senator Schumer about removing the SALT cap for state and local tax deduction, it seems that those Penn numbers are going to need to be rerun, because I think there's going to be a lot less tax revenue than we think, and combined with the spending, it'll be a much bigger deficit number.
And, Wendy, when you look at the Trump side, a lot of points made about this would, add somewhere between $4 and $5 trillion to the deficit, depending on whether you score it dynamically or just score it on its own. What do you think on the Republican side of their plan versus what Vice President Harris has talked about as it relates to the deficit?
So as it relates to the deficit, I think Harris administration would be far more committed to a responsible fiscal trajectory and far more committed to making our tax code more progressive. You didn't talk about tariffs. I think implementing a 10% across-the-board tariff on all imported goods would not only raise precious little revenue, because it would incredibly disrupt where firms are trying to source their imports from, but it could also potentially reduce economic growth, which would have its own negative effects on revenues. So broadly speaking, I think the Harris plan would leave a lot more money around to be invested in the private sector where it can be productive.
And Scott, what about that? I mean, what's been surprising to me, and Becky and I were talking about this earlier, is that on the Republican side, you have very little discussion about cutting government costs. But everything that we've heard from the Trump campaign as it relates to taxes are about basically giving tax cuts, more tax cuts to companies, more tax cuts to people, exempting tip wages, et cetera. And aside from some vague notion that maybe tariffs can pay for some of it, that's not part of the tax plan because it doesn't go through Congress. What about the pay-fors on the Republican side, or are they just going to accept whatever trillions of dollars it's going to add to the deficit just by extending these tax cuts and perhaps adding more? Is that acceptable?
I don't think so. I mean, this is, in the olden days, the Republican Party paired tax cuts with spending reform as well, and particularly at the big drivers of our spending and our debt problem being entitlements, Medicare and Social Security and the rest. These days, if you look at the GOP platform on Medicare and Social Security, it's a couple of lines, there's no details, and of course they're vowing
so they don't really
that.
Do they just not? I mean, they've been talking about the deficit for at least a year, if not more. Do they really just not care about it, or will they care once they get in office?
Yeah, I'm hoping it's more of the latter. We are getting in that silly season where there's not a lot of substance, but I would certainly hope for more. And I would just agree with Wendy that the tariff stuff just ain't going to cut it. It would not only be a huge tax on consumers, but it's not going to touch the amount of revenue that we would need to replace in the income tax or hit the spending targets we need to balance the budget.
And Wendy, going back to your point about Vice President Harris, I was a little surprised that if she is trying to appeal to moderates, she's trying to be a centrist here. She basically just, and maybe they just don't have time given where we are in the campaign season, but just lifting that White House budget and essentially her saying, look, I don't really have much of a tax plan, but I endorse the proposals in the 2024-2025 White House budget, which included things like taxing unrealized gains, which included things like bringing the capital gains tax to the highest ever in history. Why would she do that if she's trying to appeal to moderates and even to business that may see her as a safe alternative?
I think She's showing she has two broad goals. First is raising more revenue to leave more money available for private investment and fund our spending priorities. Second is to do more to tax the corporate sector and higher income people, which I completely get as a priority. We need to make our tax system more progressive, given how incredibly unequal income is in this country, pre-tax and transfer. And as far as money that we're raising from the corporate sector, we're raising maybe half as much from the corporate sector as the other developed countries. So broadly speaking, I think her goals are in the right place. There's lots of ways that we can think about doing more to tax higher income, higher wealth people. Stepped up basis at death is just completely absurd and just adds to wealth inequality.
Agreed.
But we're going to have a robust tax debate about the best way to do this. I think what she's doing is laying her priorities on the table.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're absolutely right. And Becky and I have talked about that. You just close some of these loopholes like stepped up in basis, like carried interest, as opposed to doing something that is radically different from anything we've ever done, which is taxing unrealized gains, which exposes her to so much criticism and makes Americans afraid that they're going to start doing that with their houses, with their small businesses, with restaurants. I just think it opens up a whole can of worms that, had she been more selective about her tax proposals, she could have avoided maybe.
Well, keep in mind, for anybody lucky enough to own their home, we're all paying property taxes. This idea that we don't have a system that taxes wealth is just not right. Wendy?